Dealing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Rulings are hard. I mean, it's not as hard as dealing with the death of a superstar, a massive pandemic that has made the entire economy crash, and on top of that, murder hornets? I mean, who's counting? And while I can't solve the first 3 problems just yet, I haven't invented Monster Reborn as a real-life thing. I can't tell the economy that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is more important than food, water, toilet paper, and oil. And yeah, I don't know where those murder hornets pack that thing on them to actually, like, murder. But what I can do is answer you guys' questions that you have asked about some important rulings that can win you games. This is gonna be a pretty exciting video because every time before I make this video, I ask you guys the questions. So of course, if you want to be included into this video, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Also hit the like button and then post your question down below. Without further ado, let's jump on in. So I really do like to start off these videos with reading off the exact question and then answering the question the best way possible. Now for the players that are wondering, I don't actually do every single one of these questions myself. I have a team of judges that I collaborate with. I give my initial answers to the question and they make sure that it's completely correct without missing anything to it, and then we proceed to the next question. Seven Sins Z3R0, by the way, excellent name, asks, I have a question regarding Parallel Xseed from the Eternity Code set. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. You guys get what I'm trying to say. If I link summon a monster like Romulus using monsters that get an effect when they're sent to the graveyard, such as Absol Dragon or Black Dragon Calip Serpent, White Dragon Wyvern Buster, can Parallel Xseed be summoned or does it miss timing? This is actually a really good question, and I love to talk about cards from the newer sets, and I also want to take this time out to talk about mistiming. It's been actually some time since Konami has made a critical card effect that could miss timing. Let me explain to you guys the last time I remember where a critical strategy involved missing timing. It was like Yang Zing's back in 2014. Now, the destruction of Yang Zing monsters must be the last thing to happen in order for them to miss timing. So let's say, for example, in response to my monster being summoned, my opponent wishes to use Mystical Space Typhoon, but in the same activation window as Chainlink 2, they wish to use Torrential Tribute. Chains will resolve backwards, Torrential Tribute would destroy all monsters on the field, and then Mystical Space Typhoon would destroy a spell or trap card on the field. But since the Yang Zing monster wasn't the last thing to happen, its destruction not being the last thing to happen, it was Mystical Space Typhoon's actual destruction, then my Yang Zing monster wouldn't be able to use this effect. Parallel Xseed is actually worded completely different from cards that would miss timing. This card says if a monster is link summoned, you can special summon it to your side of the field. Keep in mind when monster effects say if and then you can, they can never miss timing. So in this particular situation, you would actually just activate all of your card effects in Xseed call. That means simultaneous effects go on chain. Assuming that all of your monster effects are optional but do not miss timing, you can choose the order of which cards happened before, which actually leads us to an entirely different thing in chain blocking, but I think we'll leave that for another video. So in essence, to answer your question, yes, you can still use Parallel Xseed even if you are using other card effects that would activate at the same time. You apply Seacog as mandatory effects would go first, and then your optional effects would go second, and then you get to choose your different optional effects. Vincent Kiefer asks a really good question. Why does something like Cyber Dragon just special summon itself, whereas Backup Secretary activates an effect to special summon from hand? Or what about, say, Pinkatrops, for example? Well, there's actually a really huge difference between a monster being able to special summon without an effect and a monster special summoning as a part of an effect. The crazy thing is all 3 of these monsters you just listed do not activate the summon, so I don't know if Backup Secretary was a great example, but we're gonna roll with it. Now, these are the type of questions that I love to answer because I love to reiterate the basics to Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. If you ask me, the basics are the most important thing of the card game. We can learn about those complexities a little later, but if we don't have the basics down, it doesn't matter all this other stuff that we don't know. We kind of need to know this. Now, the reason why Cyber Dragon, Backup Secretary, and of course Pinkatrops all special summon themselves without activating their effects is the lack of a semicolon. As you guys can see in Cyber Dragon, there's no semicolon, meaning you could just special summon it without activating its effect. Now moving back to Parallel Xseed, this is a card that will activate to summon itself. We can tell because it actually has a colon. That means anything before the colon is an activation requirement, meaning that it must be met in order to summon the card, and typically in this type of form, a monster summoning itself to the side of the field will activate in the hand. Dakin Watson adds, can I pop pendulum cards on the field to activate Magician Soul's draw to effect? Now I actually want to talk about a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh terminology. When you guys use the term pop, it tends to actually mean destroy. And looking at Magician Soul's effect, it doesn't destroy whatsoever. One thing I do want to dive into is that when you are discussing card effects, it is important, it is pertinent that you guys actually say what the card does. It helps tremendously for newer players to understand the dynamics between sending cards to the graveyard, destroying cards, banishing cards, and then applying the slang terminologies to the proper card. So in this particular situation, Magician Souls would not pop. I mean, it kind of pop in price, but that's for a different type of slang and terminology. So to answer your question, Mr. Watson, Magician Souls would actually not be able to send a pendulum card in the scale or hand to be able to activate its effect. And it's a lot simpler than what quite a few other people have mentioned. The reason why you can't send a pendulum scale to the graveyard is because Magician Souls must send a card from the field to the graveyard or hand to the graveyard for cost. And that's pretty much it. If you guys remember the earlier portions of this video, we said that cards with semicolon is cost and Magician Souls needs to be able to send the card to the graveyard. But pendulum mechanics state that instead of going to the graveyard, they go to the extra deck instead. This makes your pendulum scales invalid targets because they cannot be sent from the field to the graveyard to be able to fulfill the conditions of Magician Soul's first effect, or cost. It's not an effect, it's cost. So the next two questions, I'm going to answer them both pretty much at the same time because they're asking relatively the same question. Peter Malinica, I hope I said your name right. Okay then, what if I use Nibiru and chain with Orcus Nightmare? What will happen is then Nibiru resolve because in Orcus Engine you specifically Okay, I understand what he's saying. He's asking about Nibiru's interaction with an Orcus monster, but either I can't read or he can't type or a combination for both. We all understand what he's saying. John 650 asks, opponent activates Nibiru. I chain with number 75 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow. Thank you so much for not just saying a number and giving me the card names. I'm not that type of guy. To change the effect to both players draw one card. What happens to Nibiru? Does it get discarded, get destroyed, or sent to the graveyard? Well, to answer Peter's question first, if Nibiru was activated and said player activating Nibiru wishes to use a card effect to prohibit them from summoning Nibiru, such as Orcus Nightmare, because it's chain link too, it would be the last thing that happens and it would resolve, preventing him from summoning anything other than dark. Then under this situation, you will resolve as much as possible. This would mean tributing all monsters on the field, and then since you can't summon Nibiru, it would just stay in your hand. To answer John 650's question, 650! Yes, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow would actually resolve, resulting in both players drawing a card, and that's it. Nibiru would stay in hand. Abdelrahman El Feki asks, why are you a legend? Well, when I was younger, I had my dairy and I read text. That's what made me legendary. Kurt Diagon says, alright, I have two questions. Can Broadsword still attack twice if I activate rocket monsters that I targeted with Broadsword? His second question, if he negates the summon of his opponent extra deck monster, whether it's Fusion, Synchro, Xseed, or Link, or a monster that must first be special summoned, is it true that neither my opponent or myself can summon that monster from the graveyard since it wasn't properly summoned and it was negated? Well, to answer your first question is Broadsword is actually a really tricky card for new players. Typically, if you can't do A, then you can't do B in Yu-Gi-Oh! So for example, going back to Jet Synchron, if I can't discard a card from my hand, I can't special summon Jet Synchron. Is that the best analogy? No. But Broadsword is going to be a completely different class in its own. Because Broadsword does contain also in its card text, it really doesn't matter if the monster's battle position was changed or not. It's still going to be able to get its effect to attack twice. And that's the power of also. To answer your second question, yes, a card must be properly summoned first in order for you to bring it back to your side of the field again. So if a monster like Notoria Beast Summon was negated by the effects of Solemn Judgment, you won't be able to Monster Reborn that Naturia Beast back to the side of the field. Well, that is it for all of the ruling questions we have for today. It was really exciting to be able to answer some of you guys' important rulings. If you guys have some ruling questions, be sure to post down below in the comment section. A team of judges will be trying their best to answer your questions. When you do, please be sure to ask your question in the form of a question and not just blurt out 2 card names. That is not helpful for anyone. Of course, I hope you guys are staying safe in this time of need and having an amazing day like I am. It's just really an amazing day because I get to go work out now.